So maybe you're having a really hard time letting go of an avoidant partner who may not even be in a serious relationship with you. And maybe you find yourself feeling like, am I making the wrong decision? Is this the right thing? And constantly second guessing all of your own actions and behaviors. Well, why is it that being with an avoidant leaves such a lingering effect on your emotions and on how you feel? Maybe you even think sometimes that the connection feels deeper, but there's constant uncertainty. And maybe you're feeling sick and tired of just being in that gray area of not knowing if there will ever be relationship progress. Well, in today's video, we are going to cover 5 major reasons that you may struggle to let go of an avoidant. And we'll talk about what you can do to make this process so much easier very immediately. Now, if you're new to this channel, my name is Gibson. I am a counselor, coach, author, founder of the Personal Development School, and I make daily content on here all about relationships, attachment styles, how to really build the best relationships of our lives through learning patterns that create secure connections, and also doing inner healing if we had a turbulent childhood or challenges in our own upbringing where things might have been missing. Okay, so let's talk about these 5 key points. Here's the very first important point that you've been watching this channel for a little bit. You probably hear me talk about fairly frequently, but I'm hoping it's just really helpful to anybody who needs to hear this today. And it's that avoidants create these push-pull dynamics that often keep the partners guessing. Now, they're not intending to do this. That puts you in like narcissistic territory, right? If somebody's intending to keep you guessing and play all these really intense games. But avoidants, because of their own attachment trauma, both dismissive avoidance and fearful avoidance, often go back and forth in their own mind about whether or not they feel comfortable staying in a relationship. And as many of you know, if you don't know much about the 4 attachment styles, by the way, I will put just a description in the description box below. But if you didn't already know this, fearful avoidance, part of what they do is they activate, but they also deactivate when they feel threatened or afraid or confused. And so they will pull back whenever they feel confused. Whereas you'll see anxious attachment styles constantly try to activate, get closer if they are feeling like somebody's pulling away from them. Dismissive avoidance almost exclusively deactivate. They almost always shut down and pull away. And these are forms of self-protection. So now we've established both fearful avoidance and dismissive avoidance often pull away to protect themselves. But what happens is from this place of self-preservation or self-protection, it leaves the partner feeling like they're getting a little bit of emotional whiplash sometimes. Hey, you were here, you were interested, now all of a sudden you're shut down. Which is it? Which one are you choosing? But because each of them are going through their own emotional turbulence and fears about connection and closeness, that causes their own fears to basically translate into the relationship, causing intermittent reinforcement. Now, intermittent reinforcement in relationships, when somebody's hot and cold or there and then pulled away, or mostly shut down and then has these sort of sparks or glimpses of being connected, intermittent reinforcement has been shown to have a massive impact on dopamine receptors in the brain and is also shown to have really addictive components and qualities. If you ever think of somebody gambling, for example, and they're pulling the slot machine, what do you think they're addicted to? They're addicted to intermittent reinforcement, the actual neurochemistry produced from that intermittent reinforcement of sometimes you win with the slots, sometimes you lose, you never know what's going to happen. And there's been lots of different research studies that I talk about on this channel that highlight the impact of intermittent reinforcement on the brain and on how we tend to experience love and connection. And it can absolutely have addictive components. So that's really number one. Number two, the sudden withdrawal often leaves a person wondering, was this my fault? Did I do something wrong? And for the vast majority of people watching this right now, if you feel like you've done something wrong, what do you usually want to be the answer? You usually want the person to forgive you, to let it go, to tell you you're good enough, you're okay, you're worthy. And so often, if we're personalizing somebody else's behaviors, in other words, if when that person shuts down, we're like, oh no, was it me? Did I do something wrong here? If we're making it about us and how we're unworthy or not good enough, or it's all our fault, then of course, you're going to seek the gratification and relief of somebody telling you, oh, it is okay, or somebody coming back and making an effort with you so that you don't feel like it's about you not being good enough or unworthy or unlovable. But the reality is that those are actually somebody's core wounds. When we personalize other people's behaviors, it's because of usually us feeling like that at earlier times throughout our lives, frequently enough that it became a part of what we tend to assume. So, if you've ever seen this before, if you were abandoned a lot growing up or had experiences of fearing abandonment a lot growing up, you tend to fear abandonment in your adult relationships. If you felt betrayed in your childhood, you often feel afraid of being betrayed as an adult. Oh my gosh, can I trust people? If you felt not good enough or unworthy growing up, that's what you're going to assume in your adult relationships. And that's more of a reflection of the unresolved attachment wounding in you rather than the actual objective experience of what you did right or wrong. Okay. So, sure, we can make mistakes, but it doesn't always mean that because you made a mistake, you're suddenly unlovable or you're definitely not good enough as a human being. But if we give that meaning to things, it becomes really painful. And then we'll definitely seek the reward or the relief of having somebody make an effort with us because it seems to invalidate this painful idea we were thinking about ourselves. Number three, another really important piece here is that when somebody is emotionally unavailable, sometimes this is actually our shadow. And what I mean by this, without going too far down the rabbit hole of the shadow, although there's again a lot of content on this channel about this, is oftentimes our subconscious mind because it's seeking familiarity because it equates what's familiar to what's safe. And thus, we're more likely to survive when we're safe and in a familiar territory. What often happens is we choose people who treat us the way we treat ourselves. Why? Because that's most familiar. And so oftentimes you'll find yourself, if you are the type of person that dismisses yourself, puts yourself last, doesn't show up for yourself in a relationship in a healthy way, doesn't really show up for your own feelings or needs or boundaries, guess what you're attracted to? People who will mirror that back to you. And the way we fix and solve for this is how? By changing it in ourselves first so that we make our own zone of familiarity a healthy one. Have you ever wondered why secure people always end up in relationships with secure people? It's because how they treat themselves is secure first. And so that's what they're attracted to and thus invest in other people long term. And if we are somebody who dismisses our own feelings, needs, and boundaries all the time, we're going to attract and invest in people who do that back to us because your conscious mind, which is responsible for 3 to 5%, by the way, of all of your beliefs and thoughts and emotions and actions, is never going to outwill your subconscious mind, which is responsible for 95 to 97%. We can rewire it, but we can't outwill it. And so your conscious mind says, I want somebody healthy and who's going to show up for me and invest in me. But guess what? If you're not doing that within yourself, your subconscious says, that's not familiar. We don't want it. We're going to reject that. We're going to keep going for people who treat us the way we treat ourselves. So this brings me to a point here that I want to take you through for a second, almost like an exercise. And you can do this exercise mentally, but this actually comes from a very small part of a much larger course we have for this and I still have two other points, but I'm going to take you through this exercise here. But if you actually want to do a deeper dive into this, this is from our shadow work course that you can actually check out fully for free for 14 days. The course is like 2 hours long. It's more than enough time to get through. You can actually, the 14-day trial is for everything in PDS, every course. So you can go in there and you can go nuts for 14 days and take as many courses as you want and join our webinars and live events. I'll put a link to the free trial down below. We do this once a year, so it's just for a limited time. But this exercise is designed to help you see this. So I actually want to guide you through this as our point number 4 here of 5. I want you to look at the things that trigger you the most in your past relationships. Okay. It can be things like this. It can be, somebody who dismissed me, somebody who was never present, somebody who doesn't listen to me, somebody who ignored my feelings or didn't try to make space for my feelings, somebody who never made me feel chosen, somebody who made me feel like I was too much, somebody who criticized me a lot or shamed me, somebody who expected too much from me or took advantage of me. Like, I want you to think of those things, those big triggers in your relationships. And once you have 1 or 2 of them, some of you might be like, oh my gosh, there was like 5 of them I related to. That's fine. Keep all 5. But once you have a couple of them that you're like, okay, these are the big patterns of what triggers me the most in relationships, I want you to ask yourself with a radically honest perspective here, from 1 to 10, how much do you also do those things in the relationship to yourself? So if you're like, oh, nobody ever chooses me, how much are you choosing yourself? How much are you choosing to prioritize your own time, your own needs, your own boundaries, the things that matter to you? How much, if you feel taken advantage of, do you take advantage of yourself to please other people? How much, if somebody, ignores your feelings, do you also ignore your feelings because you're too busy people pleasing everybody? How much, if you feel criticized, are you really critical of your own internal dialogue to yourself? And once you're really clear about this, guess what you're going to see? Oh, geez, no wonder I pick people like this, because People you will invest in what's comfortable and familiar, meaning if you're doing this to yourself, you'll invest in people who mirror that back to you. Okay. Now, point number 5, last but not least, is oftentimes one of the most difficult parts about why it's so hard to move on from an avoidant is because there's a lack of closure. Okay. A lot of people need certainty more than they think. They need certainty of like why the relationship ended, the certainty of having closure and having a conversation, the certainty of knowing what your boundaries are post a relationship ending. And that's a big need for a lot of people. And oftentimes you'll find yourself in a position where you're like, I'm not getting certainty from this person or situation. If that's the case, here's what you do. You create your own certainty. Why do I not want to be with somebody who is not able to invest in me? What are the costs of staying in a relationship dynamic like this long term? What are my needs and standards in a relationship? And from 1 to 10, how much was this person even meeting them? And this isn't me like saying something negative about avoidance. Avoidance, when they're doing the work, are amazing. They can really show up and do the work. That can be said for every attachment style. But the most important thing that you're going to vet for is somebody actually doing the work. Because if they're not, then what their actions are going to continue. And for a lot of you who are sitting here wondering why it's so hard to get over an avoidant, it's because you haven't had the opportunity yet to actually truly look at the situation and say, am I dating their potential? Am I dating the fantasy I have of them in the future or how they might show up? Or am I actually dating who this person shows up and shows me that they are? And that's a really important question for anybody who's having a hard time getting over somebody. Because if you're consistently investing in somebody's potential and that potential is really wrapped up more in the fantasy than in the reality, and if they're not doing the work, then you're betraying and abandoning yourself. But if somebody is doing the work, then you can vet, then you can set a deadline, see if the needle moves, all those amazing things. And sometimes there's incredible progress that comes out of that. But that is the most important question to ask yourself in the process, which will give you your own certainty and closure. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe if you do enjoy this channel. Thank you so much for watching and stopping by.